So I'll just wait for a minute while it says its recording's about to start. Okay, welcome folks. This is lecture 3 of HUL256, critical thinking. Today is Monday, the 10th of January, and we are now getting into the meat of the course. I hope that everyone here has been able to join the Piazza course page, which is where all the course material is being posted, and that everyone also has taken a note of the tutorial timings. Let me just bring those up for you. Where's it gone? So these are the tutorial slots. Can you see the screen?
Yes, sir. We can see the screen.
Okay. So any questions here about either the timings or what is to be done?
No, sir. I think it's fine for me.
Okay. So as I said again, unlike the classrooms, the lectures which I'm recording, the tutorials I won't record because that allows for a more free-flowing discussion. No attendance requirements, in the sense I'm not going to take attendance or penalize people for not showing up. But the material that we discuss, especially the readings that I assign for tutorials, will be part of the record of this course, and you'll be expected to answer questions about them and so forth. And this week at least, well, yeah, so that's it for the tutorials. So last week, I gave a kind of general orientation towards the course, and then in the last lecture, we had a brief discussion about the ideal of a critical thinker and its connection with the ideal of freedom. That was the reading by Elliot Cohn. And I mentioned that there's a persistent theme in the Western philosophical tradition which links up the idea of freedom, of being free, with the idea of thinking for oneself. And the contrast sometimes is thinking for oneself as opposed to thinking blindly or slavishly, in the bad kind of way. And we're going to explore this theme in a few more readings, including the reading I've assigned for the tutorial, which is a very famous, very short essay by the German philosopher Immanuel Kant, which is called "What is Enlightenment?" And I should say that in the Western philosophical tradition, this question of thinking for oneself has often been bound up with questions about religion, thinking for oneself, as opposed to being guided by a holy book or being guided by a church, which decides what one should or should not think. So when you read the essay by Kant, you should keep that that in question, not just in Kant, but some of the other readings we'll do as well. So that's the plan for the tutorial. For the lectures for this week, we're going to begin with what I described to you as a toolkit with which to think critically. And recall Cohen's point, that free thinking involves being open to evidence and to argument. Well, the first step in being able to do that is to even just understand what the evidence is, what is the argument that's being made. We'll spend really the first few weeks, I think the first 2-3 weeks of the course, at the very least, looking at various aspects of this point. And this week we're going to look at very specifically the connection between language and argument. And why is that important? Because as your readings, if you've had a chance to look at them, would suggest language can come in the way of thinking clearly. And as it happens, this fact can be misused by well, amongst other people, bad actors, people who want you to believe in propaganda of all sorts, maybe people who want you to sell things to you, uh, which may not be in your best interests. Those are the two categories that we'll look at in terms of application next week. So if we're interested in being able to evaluate arguments and evidence, the first step is we need to be able to locate where this argument and evidence is. And one part of doing that involves becoming more self-aware of the way in which language can affect how one thinks. And that's the topic that unites the readings assigned for this week. The first of which is this a concept made famous by a cognitive scientist called George Lakoff. And Ruthie, I see you have your hand up. So before I get to you, actually, why don't you go ahead? Why don't you go ahead and then I'll start talking about Lakoff. Yeah.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
So sorry to interrupt in between, but a friend of mine is messaging me that he sent a request to be added to this channel because he wants to attend this class, even though he's not a part of this course.
Achha, so I don't know how to do that.
Sir, if you can give a meeting link, that would also work. But I think he sent a request to you to be added to the channel, I guess.
But it's hard for me to do that in the middle of class, especially when things are in the middle of a lecture. So he may just have to miss this class.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. I'll let you know.
What I'll do is, yeah, and now I'll post it here on the chat box. You can post it to him. Anyway, the recordings, people should just email me. Email me in advance, a day in advance, and these things can easily be solved.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so let me talk about the first of the readings that I assigned for this week by this cognitive scientist called George Lakoff. And it's called Framing 101, How to Take Back Public Discourse. And the real key term here is this term, framing. What is Lakoff's point? So in fact, the reading I will send you two different readings. One, this very general piece, and just a few pages from a chapter in this book. The book is called Don't Think of an Elephant. And then the second reading is a case study of a particular word, that is marriage, in the context of debates around gay marriage. What is Lakoff's main point? Lakoff's main thought is that the way you describe things changes how we think about them, often quite deeply and often at an unconscious level. So when you make a choice to describe things, sometimes you're already setting up the sorts of attitudes that are appropriate towards that thing in ways that may not be immediately aware to yourself. And he gives these two examples. He gives the example of the phrase. Now these are from the American political context, and some of that may well be unfamiliar to you. It's not just the American political context, but the context 15 years ago. What's his point? So he says that one of the problems here, and he's talking as it's clear in this piece. Even though he's an academic, he's aligned with the Democratic political party, and he's giving some lessons from his professional life. Excuse me. Two members of this party essentially tend them to take control of the messaging, because he feels like the Republican Party so far has set certain political agendas just by virtue of how of the words that they use to describe what they're doing. Not because they made an argument saying, look, this is the correct agenda, but just because of the words used. And the first of these is tax relief. So what's his point? His point is, so what is tax relief? Tax relief basically, if a political party is running on a platform offering tax relief for the middle class, essentially what they're doing is offering to cut taxes for the middle class. So why would you describe a tax cut as a form of tax relief? Let's see what he says. This is the bottom. On the day that George Bush arrived in the White House, the phrase tax relief started coming out of the White House. It was repeated almost every day thereafter, was used by the press in describing his policies, and slowly became so much a part of public discourse that liberals started using it. Maybe we could, I could invite somebody who's not spoken before to just read out these lines, starting with this, think of the framing for relief. Volunteers? Okay, somebody has raised their hands. Kanad, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Think of the framing for relief. For there to be relief, there must be an affliction, an afflicted party, and a reliever who removes the affliction and is therefore a hero. And if people try to stop the hero, those people are villains for trying to prevent relief. Should I go on, sir?
Yes, please.
When the word tax is added to relief, the result is a metaphor. Taxation is an affliction, and the person who takes it away is a hero, and anyone who tries to stop him is a bad guy. This is a frame. It is made up of ideas like affliction and hero. The language that evokes the frame comes out of the White House, and it goes into press releases, goes to every radio station, every TV station, every newspaper, and soon the New York Times is using tax relief. And it is not only on Fox, it is on CNN, it is on NBC, it is on every station because it is the president's tax relief plan. And soon the Democrats are using tax relief and shooting themselves in the foot. It is remarkable.
Just pause there for a second. Why does he say this? Why does he say Democrats are using tax relief and shooting themselves in the foot? What's wrong with using that phrase?
So because in such a framing, the Republicans are basically becoming the heroes of the story who are removing the affliction of taxes. So by using that term, the Democrats are sort of also promoting the idea that it's the Republicans who are the heroes and not them.
Okay, that's, I think, one part of the story. Anything else?
Because in the past, Democrats have used these tactics also. They have cut taxes, basically.
Well, I think the thing that he's assuming that the audience knows is that, traditionally the more left of center political parties would be the ones wanting to
who
raise
had done
taxes,
something for middle class.
who want to raise taxes as opposed to cut taxes. So if you have an argument, look, we don't want to give tax relief for the middle class. Suppose, for instance, suppose you have to raise taxes in the middle class in order to help people really at the bottom of the economic rung. In the Indian context, maybe um, you need to raise taxes to pay for the Employment Guarantee Act. What is Lakoff's point? Just using the term tax relief automatically means you're on the back foot whenever you want to increase taxes, because the word relief has put you in this frame of relief versus suffering. So there's an automatic association of suffering in the context of the raising of taxes. And now if I say, look, I want to raise taxes on the middle class in order to let's say support the poorest of the poor, I have to say, look, I am opposing tax relief for the middle class, and that seems like a bad thing. That how could anyone who's opposing relief seems like automatically a bad person, or doing something wrong, regardless of what is the actual policy on the table. So that's one example of framing, and you can think of there may be alternative ways of framing that term tax relief. For instance, you could just say tax cut. It seems neither a neutral, a positive or a negative connotation. Yeah, Parth.
Sir, couldn't it be interpreted as also relieving taxes for the poor? Like you said, like I'm applying tax relief on the middle, like I'm opposing tax relief for the middle class. But if it were to be framed in a like different manner, it could also be interpreted as relieving the taxes for the poor instead of opposing and thus supporting the tax relief belief.
Well, so if I wanted to argue if I'm saying, look, we have to raise taxes on the middle class in order to support the poor, I need to find a way of saying, I think it's a good idea to raise taxes for the middle class. The Lakoff point is, you use the term tax relief, automatically any raising of taxation just by the use of the words, regardless of whether it's good policy or bad policy, just the use of the words is going to give it a negative connotation. That's the point. And so yeah, you'd have to say, then you'd have to give some other spin. That's the other word we'd use, right? Framing. We'd have to give some spin saying this is actually relief for the poorest of the poor. Let's look at the other example from Lakoff. Right, and here's the point that I wanted to draw your attention to, that using certain words, the phrase that Lakoff has in mind is, draws you into a certain worldview, and you're somebody who opposes that worldview, but you use the words that that person uses, then there's a way in which you've lost the battle, even without actually engaging in any critical thinking at all. You've lost the battle because there's a prior set of associations with these words that are pulling you in directions that have nothing to do with the merits of the case. What's the other example that he uses? I'm going a bit slower today than I would normally go, but I think we'll just start picking up pace from Thursday onwards. And again, we are in 2005. A State of the Union address is. Well,
Sir, can I ask a question?
Tell me.
Sir, as you have said that Democrats have increased tax for middle class, but if they saying that it is remarkable we have seen Democrats adopting the conservative view of taxation as an affliction when they have offered tax relief for the middle class. So what does it mean? Democrats also have used, also have decreased the tax relief for the middle class.
Right. So the point he's making is that, look, you may be, there are two issues. One issue is what is the policy you follow. The other is the issue of how do you describe that policy. And Lakoff's point is you may have the same policy as your political opponents, but if you describe the policy in the way they are describing it, then you're stuck because
Yes, sir.
you're wedded to this idea that, look, taxation will always be an affliction. But what about those cases when in fact you do want to raise taxes because you want to pay for other things? Then this frame is still going to linger as the frame where it's essentially an affliction.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So let's look at the second example. A State of the Union address is like just a general address by the President of the USA in the beginning of the year, saying, "Look, this is what's happening in the country," and he says, "We do not need a permission slip to defend America." What does that mean, by the way? What's the context for saying we do not need a permission slip to defend America? In circa January 2005, what would have been happening?
The war against terror.
Okay, and what aspect of that war would?
The invasion of the Middle East, I suppose.
Yeah, of Iraq. This would be I think in the context of debates around the invasion of Iraq, what where there was a big debate. There was whether in fact the US could have standing to invade by itself, or whether, for instance, it would require a United Nations authorization to go to war with Iraq. So I think it's in the context of debates about the legitimacy of entering into armed conflict absent an authorization from the UN. And President Bush says we don't need a permission slip to defend America. He could have said we won't ask permission, but talking about a permission slip is different. Why did I have, again, somebody who's not spoken so far, just read the end of this passage from where I've highlighted. Okay, let's have Unnati go.
So just confirming after the highlighted part now.
Yeah.
Think about when you last needed a permission slip. Think about who has to ask for a permission slip. Think about who is being asked. Think about the relationship between them.
Okay, so just pause there. So what's the point? What's the point he's making? What is a permission slip? And what are the answers? Who has to ask for a permission slip? Kanad.
Yes, sir. So using the term permission slip sort of puts the whole the situation in a more bureaucratic context. Permission slip is usually needed when you have to go to some authority that is above you, and you have to wait and go through a bureaucratic process to actually get the permission. So that's the difference that using the word permission slip is, instead of permission, is creating that. They don't have to wait for an external bureaucratic authority, and to defend America. And again, they're phrasing the invasion as a defense. So
you already have, that's one big framing, which we'll talk about in terms of uh, in another context later in the course. But yeah, I think the thought is, Likov's thought is, if you want to kind of assert your right under international law or whatever to go and invade another country, where the United Nations might be a barrier to being invaded, here's a nice way of rhetorically moving the barrier aside. Look, I don't need your permission. Forget about the fact that this is international law, etc. But by calling it a permission slip, he's making it seem that the United Nations is, it's trying to be some kind of super authority above the US, and we're just standing up for ourselves and our own interests. We don't have to take permission from this higher authority. Once you've introduced that term permission slip into the language, into the discourse, and you're somebody who's, let's say, opposed to the invasion of Iraq, now it looks like you don't have to answer the question, what justifies invading Iraq? And you say, look, it's not justified because it's in contravention of international law. You have to ask, what justifies asking somebody else for the permission slip before we can defend our interests? Really, the same issue, but framed in such in a different way that the framing by itself has already got you the answer that the other side wants. And then let me give you the third example. This is from the other reading, the example of gay marriage. And his point is, this is in the context of a great deal of political change in the US between 2004 to 2014, and then even afterwards, and now a time when gay marriage is fully legal in the US, as far as I understand. And what's his point is, opponents of gay marriage, they liked to use the term gay marriage because in their, the term gay to them carried negative connotations, or if not negative connotations, at least connotations having to do with things like sex. Gay sex, connotations that, well, even better than that, homosexual connotations having to do with sexuality of a kind that maybe their own constituents would not be so happy about. Here's the passage that I was interested in. Why don't somebody, again, somebody who's not read at all before, actually read from here, like most important concepts. I'm just going to go to the queue, and I'm going to give preference to somebody who's. Arun, have you read before?
No, sir.
Okay, go for it.
Like most important concepts, marriage also comes with a variety of prototypical cases. The ideal marriage is happy, lasting, prosperous, and with children, a nice home, and friendships with other married couples. The typical marriage has its ups and downs, its joys and difficulties, typical problems with children and in-laws. The nightmare marriage ends in divorce, due perhaps to incompatibility, abuse, or betrayal. It is a rich concept.
Yeah, so this is all part of the frame
None of the
associated with
richness we
marriage. Yeah, carry on. Yeah.
The richness we have just discussed require marriage to be heterosexual. Its rituals, its family life, its hopes and dreams. The locus of the idea that marriage is heterosexual is a widespread cultural stereotype. So should I continue?
Yeah.
In invoking this stereotype, language is important. The radical right used to use gay marriage. Now it's homosexual marriage. One reason I believe is the idea of sex, and most Americans do not favor sex that isn't heterosexual. The stereotype of marriage is heterosexual. Gay for the right connotes a wild, deviant, sexually irresponsible lifestyle. But gay marriage is a double-edged sword. President Bush chose not to use the words gay marriage in State of Union address. I suspect that the omission occurred for a good reason. His position was that marriage is defined as a being between a man and a woman, and so the term gay marriage should be an oxymoron, as meaningless as gay apple or gay telephone. The more gay marriage is used, the more normal the idea of same-sex marriage becomes, and the clearer it becomes that marriage is not defined to exclude the very possibility. The grammar is important. Gay is grammatically a modifier specifying a kind of marriage. If you understand the expression, then it's not a contradiction in terms. And
Okay, Aaron, thanks.
marriage is not defined because it's a
It's just me, but I was hearing a lot of your voices coming in and out. But I don't know, is it my connection or did others have the same issue?
It's for me
might be
also.
my connection.
Okay.
Yeah, it might be my connection.
So what Lakoff goes on to do is say that for people who believed in gay marriage, that is, many people also whom he politically sympathizes with, the thing to do when asked questions that seem to kind of question this idea is to turn the framing around. So let's see where it says here. I'm just going to move on. Where is it gone? Why don't I have somebody just read this paragraph? We all have to put our ideas out there. And again, somebody who's not read at all so far. There are 37 people on this call. I think only 3 or 4 people have read. Okay, Aaron, go ahead.
All right. We all have to put our ideas out there so that political candidates can readily refer to them. For example, when there is a discussion in your office, church, or other group, there is a simple response for someone who says, I don't think gays should be able to marry. Do you? The response is, I believe in equal rights, period. I don't think that the state should be in the business of telling people who they can and can't marry. Marriage is about love and commitment, and denying the right to marry to people in love who want a public lifetime of commitment is a violation of human dignity.
Okay, so just pause there. So you can see how, Lakoff would call this an issue of reframing, right? Something that has to do with gay marriage, where it looks like the association is with sex. Now, you move the conversation by talking about things like marriage equality. That is one phrase that gets used quite a lot. So you think, suppose you're somebody who's opposed to gay marriage, and you frame that as, oh, so and so is opposed to marriage equality. Now it looks like the framing is against them, right? Because to say I'm against marriage equality makes it sound like I'm against equality, and that's a bad thing. You see how this game is played, how the framing of even a topic for a debate, let's say for a television debate or a headline. I say such and such policy is, such and such politician is against gay marriage. That could be one headline, just reporting a speech. or I say such and such politician is against marriage equality, those headlines have very different, might evoke very different kinds of responses, right? Which one would be better? Which one would be more accurate, do you think? Chamber.
It depends. I mean, none of them are more accurate than the other. It depends on like, is it being used for an ulterior motive? If yes, on either side, it's wrong. In my opinion, public discourse from the media outlet should be as objective as possible. So in that sense, from viewing from that viewpoint, if its intended consequences to elicit a positive or negative response, it is, in my opinion, morally ambiguous and kind of wrong.
Okay. Anyone else? Yeah, and then Kanad.
So I agree with the fact that like both are like equally accurate. It's just a matter of framing. But then I do not like any sort of framing does evoke some sort of emotion, right? So it is important to frame it in the right way. So it's basically what you believe in and what you want, what you feel is right, and trying to make sure that other people get the message in the same way.
Okay. So for our purposes, I would say in many situations, it's going to be impossible not to choose a frame that's either pro or con. As critical thinkers, our main job is to be alert as to what the frame is. If there is a frame that's pushing us in a certain direction, to be kind of alert to that, and if necessary, to resist them. And in particular, not to be kind of moved by the words themselves to taking or rejecting positions which must be rejected, must be assessed sort of on their merits. We'll get to more examples in a moment. Kanad, you had your hand up.
Yes, sir. Actually, what I was about to say was basically following through from what Aryan said. Is that I would say that we have to pick a frame because it's necessary. So, but if we had to pick one, then I would go with the gay marriage frame because I think it also brings out the another conflict, which is that what the like there shouldn't be negative connotations associated with the word gay itself. So, as such, gay marriage should be the term that should be used in public discourse, as opposed to marriage equality, which to me sounds somewhat ambiguous. Because what kind of equality are we talking about? Are we talking about, like, we could be talking about equality between men and women in a marriage. So, I would say that that frame fits the conversation. Thank you. That was
Okay, fair enough. So let me move on to first of all, just think of a few more examples of words that have this sort of framing, words and phrases that have this framing effect. And then also we'll move now to a discussion of the reading by Hurley, which will add a little bit of, this is in this textbook called A Concise Introduction to Logic. I'll post that, as well as with that Cohen piece I promised you I'd post earlier. Can you think of other examples where of framing effects being used in this kind of way? Not necessarily in politics, but in other contexts. So Kanal has one example, affirmative action, as opposed to?
as opposed to say a word like reservation, maybe.
A word like reservation or a word like quota. Yeah, that would be one case. Other examples? Yeah, Shantov.
It's not exactly language, but in in the way we frame information in when you're filling forms, if something is the default, and if you're asked to like say that this is the default, check this box to get you off the default. Like for example, as an organ donor, when you're filling out your driver's license form, it asks you, do you wish to enroll in an organ donor program? Yes or no. If the default was you are already enrolled in it, check this box to get off it, or vice versa. The rates at which people, the extra effort of checking a box often deters people from
Right. So there's
basically entering the program or not.
That's a related phenomenon. I can see why you thought of it in this context, but let's leave it aside because it really, as you said, isn't about language at all. It's about defaults more generally. Think of other. Well, let me give you a couple. Let me give you 3 or 4. I'm just going to type them out and speak them at the same time. Well, it's the phrase "love jihad." What is that supposed to refer to, by the way?
So you're asking, sir, for the meaning of jihad, right? In true sense.
I'm asking the term. You've heard this? No, this particular phrase "love jihad." Have you come across this phrase?
I mean, so I have heard people saying word jihad, and I know what they think about it. But I mean, the way you are asking, love jihad, not sure what exactly that does mean.
Okay. Has anyone come across this term in this phrase in? So Karan and who else has raised their hands? Srijit. Let's go for Srijit since he's not spoken so far.
Sir, so it's like a theory made by like people that Muslim men target women from other communities, mainly Hindus, so as to like increase the population of. I mean, they try to lure them as a form of a love marriage, but end up uh, like trying to convert them into Islam, so as to raise Muslim kids or something like that.
And what is the term jihad doing in that framing? If I say to you, for instance, look, I think it's really important for interfaith couples to be able to convince one another of, you know, joining their own religion. That doesn't sound so bad, no?
I think I can answer the part. What does jihad mean in this phrase, if you allow? So.
Sure, but I'm asking that. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, so basically, according to concept of jihad, whatever convert that I had with my Muslim friends, according to them, it's basically the philosophy of fighting the people who are going against Islam. So, yeah, that is like meaning of jihad according to them.
But in general discourse, like in, why would a politician use the phrase "love jihad"?
Maybe to manipulate the people, or maybe to get the attention of certain type of people who can help him to get what he is looking for.
So it would be. I have to say, my research assistant again wants to come into the room. I can hear him crying outside. So
Yeah,
let
sure,
me
sir.
pause. Let me pause for one moment and bring it. I'm sorry for this interruption. Say hi to everyone. This is around the time he wakes up from his nap and then he's very upset when.
Sir, your video is not on, I think.
Oh, I can see my video.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, it's on.
Okay. Okay. So I was giving love jihad as an example where you might trade off on certain negative connotations of the word jihad as a way of objecting to a particular practice, which may or may not be objectionable on its terms. Another famous example, this is not an Indian context, is the example of an inheritance tax. Anyone know what's an inheritance tax?
It's a tax applied when the property is being transferred from a parent to their child.
That's right. Well, transferred, at the death of the parent, so in the form of an inheritance. Um, this was famously opposed by conservatives, I think, who decided to call it a death tax. Right? And you can see why the same tax, it's the same policy. When you describe it as an inheritance tax, it sounds like a neutral kind of thing. When you say, look, you're taxing death, it's a death tax. It's like, oh my God, how can, again, think of that headline or that ticker tape across the screen. So and so politician supports the death tax. Like, who's going to want to do that? Again, it's the same policy. Another example that comes up in one of your readings is prostitute worker. Have you come across this distinction or these terms? Traditionally, a prostitute has been seen as somebody who's immoral, having sex for the wrong sorts of reasons, outside of relationships, etc., etc. You can read, or the term that many people who work, and I'm going to say, which is the term that's used now, work in the sex trade or do sex work, that brings in this activity under the ostensibly more neutral term worker. It's a different frame. A prostitute is enmeshed in a frame that's, has very highly negative, largely moralistic connotations, versus the frame of a worker has much more positive connotation. Right? A worker, somebody who works hard, who saves money to, whatever, pay for their children's education, etc., etc. So that's one more example of this kind of framing effects at work. And that brings me now to this reading by Hurley. And Hurley draws a distinction between two linguistic functions. That's this one, to convey information, and the term that's used to describe the conveying of information is cognitive meaning. There's an alternative linguistic function, which is to express or evoke feelings, and terminology that does that is said to have emotive meaning. And Hurley illustrates this distinction with these two examples. The death penalty, which is legal in 36 states. Actually, again, let's have somebody else read out these two statements. Somebody who hasn't spoken so far and hasn't read out so far. Well, again, there are 38 people in the call. Aaron, you already spoken, right? You already did it?
I will do that, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Which paragraph, from where you want to start me?
Just start from, actually, you know what, just start from here. We'll read it a bit slowly. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. For our purpose, two linguistic functions are particularly important: to convey information and to express evoke feelings. Consider, for example, the following statements. The death penalty, which is legal in 36 states, has been carried out the most in Georgia. However, since 1977, Texas holds the record for the greatest number of executions. The death penalty is cruel and inhuman form of punishment in which helpless prisoners are dragged from the cells and summarily slaughtered into the Senate and the bloodlust of the vengeful public. The first statement is intended primarily to convey information. The second is intended, at least in part, to express or evoke feelings. These statements accomplish their respective function through the distinct kinds of terminology in which they are phrased. Terminology that conveys information is said to have cognitive meaning.
Yeah, and
and terminology that expresses or evoke feelings is said to have emotive meaning. Thus,
okay,
in
so just
the
pause
first,
there. Just if we go back to this these two sentences, there are a whole bunch of things where the point is just to convey information, right? So the term that legal, for instance, or 36 states or 1977, these are just terms that are giving bits of information, and the bits of information that they're giving don't carry any negative or positive connotation. It's just neutral. It's just information. And the contrast that Hurley wants to make is between those statements, sorry, those terms, and terms like cruel, inhuman, maybe slaughtered, bloodlust. These are all terms that have very highly a negative association attached to them, right? It's bloodlust is a bad thing. Slaughter is always a bad thing. Think about the fact that in India, at least, we speak of cow slaughter. We don't speak of cow killing. We might speak of, we don't speak of, yeah, I mean, you can think of other animals whom we would not describe as slaughtering as opposed to killing, because slaughter carries a particularly strong negative charge with it. So the first thing to note for Hurley is just this distinction between words that have primarily cognitive meaning and words that have primarily emotive meaning. So these terms, cruel, inhuman, etc., have a strong emotive meaning. Just because the term has emotive meaning doesn't mean it lacks cognitive meaning. It still conveys information, but if the word is highly emotive, then most of its communicative work may be done by the emotion part of it rather than the cognitive part of it. Why don't Shashank, you carry on reading from this next paragraph, the emotively charged statement?
The emotively charged statement about the death penalty illustrate two important points. The first is the statements of this sort usually have both cognitive meaning and emotive meaning. Therefore, since logic is concerned chiefly with the cognitive meaning, it is important that we be able to distinguish and disengage the cognitive meaning of such statements from the emotive meaning.
Okay, just
The
pause there. So
second
this is
point,
going to be just pause there, Shell. So this is going to be an important part of what we do in the next couple of weeks, and one of these aspects of the toolkit that I want you to carry with you, which is when you see a statement which is highly written in highly emotively charged language, see in your mind if you can reframe that in you know rewriting the strongly emotively charged language to remove it, or maybe even rephrase it to more positively charged language, and see does your reaction to it change. That's the first one. We'll come back to it. Shashank, why don't you carry on to the second point?
yeah, the second point is that part of cognitive meaning of such statement is value chain. A value chain is a claim that something is good, bad, right, wrong, or better, was more important or less important than some other thing. For example, the statement about the death penalty asserts the value claim that the death penalty is wrong or immoral. Such value claims are often the most important part of the cognitive meaning of emotive statements. Thus, for the purpose of logic, it is important that we be able to disengage the value claims from emotively charged statements from the emotive meaning and treat these claims as separate statements.
Okay, so just pause for a second again. So in many of the contexts that we discuss, especially in the domain of politics and law and stuff, we are making value claims about what is a good policy to have. So we might say, look, an inheritance tax is a very good policy, or we might say prostitution should not be made illegal. We might say, look, there should be no laws against love jihad. Now, the point that Hurley is making here is we should be able to assess those value claims. Should there be an inheritance tax or not? Sort of on its own terms, independently of the words that are used to describe it. And Hurley's suspicion with very emotively charged statements is that they don't allow us to make those kinds of assessments. So in fact, you can carry on reading the next paragraph where this point is made. These observations suggest.
Yeah, sure. These observations suggest the reason that people use emotive terminology as often as they do. Value claims as such normally require evidence to support them. For example, the claim that the death penalty is immortal cannot simply stand by itself. It cries out for a reason to support it, but when value claims are couched in emotive terminology, the emotive clothing tends to obscure the fact that a value claim is. Sir, the screen is not properly visible to me, I think.
Can you see now?
Yeah. Just a second. Yes. But when value claims are couched in emotive terminology, the emotive clothing tends to obscure the fact that a value claim is being made, and it simultaneously gives psychological momentum to the claim. As a result, readers and listeners are inclined to swallow the value claim involved without any evidence. Furthermore, the intellectual laziness
Just
of
pause there
many.
actually.
Yeah,
So
sure.
this is the, for our purposes as critical thinkers, really it's this point, the swallowing the value claim whole without any evidence. It's the without any evidence thing that we are concerned with. The reason we care about the distinction between cognitive and emotive meaning is not that words should not, that things should only be written purely with cognitive meaning and without any emotional charge. It is that it shouldn't obscure the fact that there are value claims being made and that these value claims actually need to be supported by evidence. They can't, just the fact that they're given in this um, uh, in this emotionally charged kind of way doesn't settle the issue. Some kinds of arguments or reasons have to be given. Let me pause there for a second and actually move to a nice set of examples from this other book by Robert Carroll. Also, chapters also on language and critical thinking, but I'm interested in this um, um, section on emotive and cognitive meanings. We've already seen one set of examples here. The terms call girl, prostitute, whore, streetwalker, sex industry worker. I think the cognitive meaning of these terms may be more or less the same. Somebody who exchanges sexual services, favors for money, but very different emotive connotation that these terms have. He has a nice set of examples here, how to tell a businessman from a businesswoman. Why don't I have somebody read just that, just this box? And again, somebody who's not read so far. Okay, Sujit, go ahead. Go ahead, Sujit.
Yes, sir. How to tell a businessman from a businesswoman? A businessman is assertive. A businesswoman is pushy. A businessman is meticulous. She is picky. He loses his temper. She is bitchy. He gets depressed. She is moody. He is persistent. She is hysterical. He is confident or self-assured. She is arrogant. He is a loner. She is aloof. He is firm. She is stubborn. He is assertive. She is mouthy. He is a private person. She is secretive. He makes quick decisions. She is impulsive. He is only human. She is emotional.
Okay, just stop there. So just think about the contrast: firm versus stubborn, being a loner versus being aloof, being confident versus being arrogant. These are often terms that can be used to describe really the same set of behaviors, and stereotypically, at least, um, when uh, when men get described, men who have that kind of behavior in a workplace context will be described with the positive versions of those terms, whereas women who exhibit exactly the same set of behavior will be described in negative terms. Is any of that familiar to you guys? Can you relate it to stuff you've seen around yourself, around you, or in classes? At least when I read it, it felt very real to me. I'm trying to think of examples where um, this happens. For instance, I think sometimes men, if they are speaking up for themselves in a classroom setting or something, one thinks of as, look, he's being assertive or he's asserting his rights, whereas a woman might, not me hopefully, but one might say, look, this person is being aggressive, where aggressive has this additional negative connotation that assertive does not. I don't know, does the example speak to you? Nope. Okay, so I should bring the session to the close. I know that I had asked Hemant and Sujit to give a quick summary at the end of class. So what's the main takeaway for me? And again, I'm hoping that we'll start going faster from next lecture onwards. But really the main takeaway, as far as I'm concerned, is this distinction between cognitive meaning and emotive meaning, and noting that the use of heavily emotive sort of language can come in the way of critical thinking, can come in the way of actually evaluating whatever kind of argument that one is being offered. And one useful kind of exercise to do when you come across a piece of writing that seems extremely emotively written is, see, can you replace words in the text that have a highly negative connotation with words that have the same cognitive meaning but don't have a negative connotation, or that have a positive connotation, and then ask yourself, look, does that change what you think about the issue at hand? And as a best practice, the the aim would be to be able to filter out the emotive meanings from statements that are being made, so as to focus on the actual claims at stake, which will often be value claims. There will be claims about, is this tax the right kind of thing to have? Should we outlaw such and such practice? To give two of the examples that we've looked at. So let me stop there and let me ask Hemant and then Sujit to give 2 minutes each on what they take to be the summary of today's class, and then also take any, and after they do that, we can take any further questions. Hemant.
Yes, yes, sir. Sir, I think, can you please elaborate that what I am supposed to do?
Oh, just some version of what I just did, just
Like
here are the three
cognitive,
main things we discussed in class, that kind of thing.
like tax relief or permission slip, cognitive meaning and emotive meaning, the term this, or value claim.
Well, you have to take a call based on what the lecture has said, in terms of summarizing its contents, or think of writing 2 lines. Maybe we won't do this in the class space itself, but once the recording is up, both of you can just write 2 lines on, look, these are the main things that were discussed in this class. Yeah, maybe that's best, rather than do it in this chat. Once the recording is up, both you and Sujit can do this by way of summarizing or tagging the lecture. Does that make sense?
Sir, where should we put these lines, these 2 lines?
Just put this in the Teams as a comment to the recording.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before we end, so Sujit, you can do the same. Then we won't use the class time for it. Any questions on this material or anything else we've done? Any doubts? Also, you should feel free to put them in the chat or put them up in Piazza.
So I have a question and one request. Yeah, so the question is, what's the name of baby? And the second thing is, like, I have, applied for this course. I'm basically doing the sit through. So I just sent you the request on MS Teams. So you need to accept so that I can come to class when I want. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, the name of the baby is Vasant. Vasant Niranjan.
Nice name.
Is his. And your MS Teams request, I will just accept. Okay, so if there's nothing from anyone else, we'll call the class to a close, and I'll see some of you during the week in tutorials. Take a look at that piece by Kant, and otherwise I'll see you next on Thursday, where we'll go a little bit more in depth on this issue of language and thought. And next week, then we'll look at something having to do with propaganda and advertising, taking on the same themes. Yep. Okay, see you guys. Have a good week.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.